This is Chapter 12. Drake McBride had stumbled into the oil business after failing at many other jobs, and ruining many other companies. He started spending money, much more money than he enjoyed working for it, and this was the secret to his lack of success. It also helped to be lazy, easy distracted, and not very good at math. Every time Drake McBride got himself into trouble, his wealthy father would simply buy a new company for him to noodle with. But now, after several wasted years and millions of wasted dollars, Drake McBride's father finally had lost patience with this free-spending poser who had happened to be his youngest son. The Red Diamond Energy Corporation was Drake's last chance. "If you screw this one up," his father warned, "you won't get another nickel from me." "Have you checked out the price of gas, Dad?" Drake McBride chortled with confidence. "Only an idiot could lose money in the oil business." "You said the same thing when you were selling real estate," his father had reminded him coldly, "or trying to sell real estate." "It's not my fault the market went sour. Get real, boy. You couldn't sell an igloo to an Eskimo," his dad had said. "Red Diamond is my last act of charity. If you come crawling back here with another lame sob story, you might as well change your name to Drake Chowderhead and sign up for bartending school. Because I am done with you. Now go find some oil and hurry up." Because the competition in Texas was fierce, and also because he owned a waterfront condo on Tampa Bay, Drake McBride chose Florida as headquarters for the new Red Diamond Energy Corporation. His first move was hiring Jimmy Lee Bayless, recently retired from Exxon Mobil, to teach him about oil exploration and find the day-to-day operation so that Drake McBride could concentrate on water skiing and fishing. It was Jimmy Lee Bayless who explained to Drake McBride that Florida's richest petroleum deposits lay miles offshore and were controlled by giant companies who had been battling for years to get drilling permits. The drilling was opposed by most Floridians, who didn't want to risk having their beaches choked with black tar in the event of an accidental oil spill. "Aw, forget about what's under the ocean," Drake McBride said, and handed the newspaper clipping to Jimmy Lee Bayless. "Here's where the fast money is, my friend." Jimmy Lee Bayless frowned at the headline. "The Everglades?" "Keep reading, partner." According to the article, the U.S. government had announced a plan to buy up the drilling rights and oil for natural gas beneath the vast Big Cypress Preserve to protect the vanishing wetlands from future damage. "All we've got to do is find some oil, any oil," Drake McBride said, "and Uncle Sam will pay us a fortune not to pump it. Isn't that the wildest thing you ever heard of?" "Sure is," said Jimmy Lee Bayless, who was immediately leery of the scheme. Tell me this isn't a great country," Drake McBride exclaimed. "But we don't own a drilling license in the Everglade." "Your job is to get me one," Drake McBride said, poking Jimmy Lee Bayless in the chest, "and make it a winner." The task turned out to be frustrating and complicated, but in a few of the oil leases that were held by huge corporations or rich old geezers who practically laughed at Jimmy Lee Bayless's offers. Eventually, he was able to obtain a single 640-acre parcel from the troubled soul named Vincent Trapwick Jr., who was facing trial for embezzlement and was frantically selling everything he owned to pay his lawyers. The Trapwick parcel, known as Section 21, was located east off Naples at a promising location near the Blackvine Swamp. Yet after months of ground testing and half a dozen boreholes, Jimmy Lee Bayless had reached the grim conclusion that Section 21 held barely enough oil to fill a goldfish bowl. The news set badly with Drake McBride, who kicked his desk viciously that he tore the python skin of one of his cowboy boots. "Too bad we don't have Section 22, Jimmy Lee Bayless remarked. "What?" Drake McBride perked up. "Is there serious oil in Section 22? "That's what the geologist thinks, but it doesn't matter. The state owns the land," Jimmy Lee Bayless said, "and they ain't selling. It's part of some wildlife preserve." "But there's oil there," he said. "How deep?" 12,000 feet is their guess. But as I told you, the state's got the property." Drake McBride snapped his manicured fingers. "I got an idea. We sink a pirate well on 22, totally secret, and then run a pipe underground to our rig on 21. Jimmy Lee Bayless's gut started to churn. Sir, it's not worth the risk. The geologist says there's no more than 900 barrels a day, and it's poor quality, pretty gooey and full of sulfur. I don't care what it looks like or how bad it stinks, said Drake McBride, as long as it's oil. All I need, or all I should say is all we need, is a genuine Florida crude to drip out some sucker's desk on the Department of Interior, who will then give us such a ginormous wad of money for our drilling rights that even my old man will be impressed. You with me? Do I have a choice? Not if you care to remain employed, said Drake McBride. And that's how the Section 22 scam had been born. Now, Jimmy Lee Bayless squinted through the open hatch of the helicopter, his line of vision following a row of small pink flags that remarked a path under which the illegal pipeline would travel from Section 22 to Section 21. The small drill rig would be concealed in a tall stand from the ball cypress and would be practically invisible even from the air. Because Section 22 was so wild and remote, Drake McBride didn't worry about getting busted for hijacking the state of Florida oil. Jimmy Lee Bayless, however, was highly concerned. It was just one wayward hiker made the wrong turn into the Blackvine Swamp, and the Red Diamond drilling scheme might unravel, and Jimmy Lee Bayless could wind up sharing a 10-by-10 jail cell with Drake McBride. The thought of that made Jimmy Lee Bayless' stomach pinch and had pushed him to take extreme measures. He wasn't a crook by nature, but the lure of making millions of dollars by not pumping oil had been too juicy for him to not resist. Still, ever since agreeing to Drake McBride's sleazy scheme, Jimmy Lee Bayless hadn't had a good night of sleep. The disturbing incident involving Melton had only worsened his jitters. Gluing a man naked to a tree doesn't seem like something an ordinary thief would do. So Jimmy Lee Bayless had decided to make daily patrols by helicopter over the wetlands, scouting for signs of intruders. So far, he had turned up nothing. You about ready to head back? The pilot asked. Sure, drop me off in my truck, said Jimmy Lee Bayless. As the chopper gently touched down on the dirt road, Jimmy Lee Bayless was surprised to see a cherry red SUV parked next to the pickup. The SUV had a set of emergency lights mounted on the cab and the initials CCFD painted on the sides. It took a few minutes for Jimmy Lee Bayless to realize that stood for Collier County Fire Department. He chewed up 4 more Tum tablets before climbing out of the chopper. The fire investigator's name was Torkelson. He had thinning blonde hair and a handshake that could crush walnuts. He wanted to chat about the fire in 22. We work in Section 21, Jimmy Lee Bayless said. Yes, I know. We were wondering if you or your men saw anything suspicious in the area that day. Like what? Like any person or persons who was supposed to be there or wasn't supposed to be there? Torkelson spoke in the mild, official tone that made Jimmy Lee Bayless uncomfortable. My crew was on another site when the wildfire broke out, he said, and I was with them. It wasn't a wildfire, Mr. Bayless said. It wasn't a wildfire, Mr. Bayless? It was arson. What? Jimmy Lee Bayless tried to hide his shock so the fire investigator wouldn't know that he was in danger of soiling his pants. Arson? That's crazy, he said with a weak laugh. What's the point of torching a swamp? Torkelson shrugged. People do crazy things sometimes. Do you recognize this? He held up a plastic ballpoint pen stamped with the letters Red Diamond Energy. For a moment, Jimmy Lee Bayless thought he might puke his breakfast muffins all over the investigator's shoes. Yeah, that's mine, he croaked. Must have fell from my pocket while I was shooting pictures from the helicopter. Which was a lie, of course. Torkelson seemed to buy it. No big deal. We're just trying to run down every lead, said the investigator. We found this pen about 150 yards from where the fire flashed up. Well, you can keep it. I got a whole box of them, Jimmy Lee Bayless was trying to sound casual and unworried. Torkelson dropped the red diamond pen into a large manila envelope and took out a small photograph. Could you take a look at this too, he said. It was a police mugshot of a pimply teenage kid who Jimmy Lee Bayless didn't recognize. In the picture, the kid looked surly and uncooperative, a pose that reminded Jimmy Lee Bayless of his own boys when they were that age. Is that the guy who started the fire, he asked. He's a person of interest. Is that the same thing as a suspect? Between you and me, yes, he's a suspect, Torkelson said. His name's Dwayne Screw Jr., a local punk who likes to play with matches. He's been arrested before. The sheriff gave us that tip. that he might have been in the area the day of the arson. By now, Jimmy Lee Bayless had steadied himself. As he examined the photograph of Dwayne Scrooge Jr., an idea took root in his mind. He got into a hustle with one of his teachers, the fire investigator went on. The next day, there was a school field trip in the swamp. And our boy Dwayne didn't show up for the bus. We're trying to find out if he snuck out here and started that fire. As payback, you mean? Jimmy Lee Bayless said. That's the theory, said Torkelson. Apparently this kid is somebody you definitely don't want to make mad. Jimmy Lee Bayless beheld the photo of the student as if it were a gift from the heavens. A real arsonist was exactly what he needed now. Never had Jimmy Lee Bayless expected anyone to figure out that the blaze of the Blackvine Swamp was intentional, because he had worked so hard to make it look like a wildfire. The purpose was to scare off the kids from the field trip before they blundered into Section 22 and spotted the Red Diamond mud pit and the drilling equipment. The students were never in serious danger. In Jimmy Lee Bayless's view, it was a controlled burn, with a dirt herm and a watery slough providing a barrier between the flames and the hikers. A whiff or two of smoke had done the trick. The teachers lined up the kids and filed out of the swamp in less than 10 minutes. Jimmy Lee Bayless had watched, though, through binoculars and a red bandana covering his mouth and nose. Afterwards, he stayed until the fire burned itself out, and then he cleared the scene of all evidence. Or so he thought. He was furious at himself for having dropped that stupid pen while setting the fire. How could I have been so careless? Drake McBride would blow a gasket if he found out. Your shirt was arson? Jimmy Lee Bayless asked. We found a suspicious line of flash marks in the underbrush, the investigator said. Jimmy Lee Bayless was glad he had taken the trouble to throw his butane torch in the canal along Route 29 on the way home that night. As a result, the only direct evidence linking him to the arson was now rusting in 30 feet of muddy alligator-infested water. The best news of all, however, was that the fire department had zeroed in on a suspect other than Jimmy Lee Bayless. This Scrooge boy was obviously a bad egg. Maybe he was the one who attacked poor Melton, thought Jimmy Lee Bayless. Getting a goon like that off the streets would be a public service. Well, what do you think? Torkelson nodded towards the photograph in the oil man's hand, which was now barely shaking at all. Ever seen that young man hanging around here? I believe I have, Jimmy Lee Bayless said, furrowing his brow in a fake concentration. Matter of fact, I'm sure of it. And that's the end of chapter 12.